What's up, everybody? I would like to welcome you to the inaugural kickoff edition of The Ultimate Fan Guy, starring me, Josh Fan Guy. That is my real last name, and I am the ultimate fan guy of pretty much everything. I even like bad reality TV shows and consider myself a pretty big fan of that stuff. But the thing I am the fan of the most, and that I sadly study the most, despite it not yet providing me with anything or much, is fantasy football. I know my fantasy football. I have a 40% cash rate or better this year on DraftKings every week. I usually play 10 to 15 lineups that are unique. And so 40% cash rate is really good. And I'm obviously a fantasy football champion. I'm currently rated Diamond on Yahoo um, through 8 seasons of play. So this is something I have a little bit of expertise on. I am trying to find a lane to maybe do this with my life because it is my passion. So I'm going to be making videos every week to highlight some of the best plays for the week that I think you can go with. I'm going to set my lineup for a bigger contest. I mean, it's a cheap contest, but it's 100,000 first or something like that. And I think it's important when you play lineups, that if you're playing single entry versus multi entry, there's definitely a little bit of differences that you want to keep in mind there. And I'll get into some of that theory a little bit more on a different video. But the truth is, I just made an hour and 15-minute long video describing every single matchup of all the remotely premium players this week, and I didn't turn the audio on for it because I'm such a freaking noob at this that it's like playing a video game and not hitting save and then having to redo everything that you just did, and it virtually makes you never play the video game again. That almost happened just now. So if this kickoff episode seems a little bit brief and abbreviated, it's because I literally just went into excruciating detail of just about every matchup and had to delete that video. So bear with me. I'm going to hit the highlights. I'm going to try to get you as much information as I can bear to give you after just having done this. So we're going to kick off. One thing I want to mention immediately, because the last video I did have Monday night's game in it or Sunday nights as well. So there was KC in it. I love Mahomes this week if you're playing Monday or Sunday night, games. But I don't like any of his receivers or any of his running backs because I just don't know where the volume is going. So I'm going to lead off with that one just to get that out of the way because it's not going to be listed here as we go down the list. Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson is overrated. He is a good quarterback, better than we thought as far as throwing the ball based on what we saw last year. However, I do like Pittsburgh's defense a lot. So with the price tag that Lamar Jackson comes with, not a big fan of him this week. I prefer options right below him, Deshaun Watson. My big quarterback plays for the week are going to be Deshaun Watson and what should be a high-scoring game at home against Atlanta. I like Carson Wentz. Let me just go down the line. I'll try to just keep it brief. So I'm not a big fan of Lamar Jackson this week because they're playing in Pittsburgh against a pretty fired-up Pittsburgh D. Deshaun Watson is one of my favorite quarterback plays this week because he's due for a bounce-back game against a bad Atlanta defense. I think he and DeAndre Hopkins both have huge weeks this week. So I do like Watson, even for that price tag. I think it's fair. Brady, I do not like at that price tag because they are going to beat the crap out of Washington and run the ball all day. Unless Belichick's like, I'm going to play fantasy this week and we're going to run the score up. But you never know when he's going to do that, and he doesn't do that often. So I don't like Brady this week simply because of the price tag, though I do think he's good for 250 and 2 touchdowns just because, Washington's terrible and they're starting Colt McCoy. Kyler Murray, I think, has some sneaky play potential this week. My problem is he hasn't had a breakout game yet. Now, if there's any week he will have a breakout game, it's against Cincy. The problem is DraftKings is pricing him like he's going to have a breakout game. So if Kyler Murray was priced where he should be, which is a lot lower based on what we've seen so far, I would love Kyler Murray this week. The problem is he's priced where I think he should be priced because he should have a fairly good week this week. But until I see him just have that dynamite week, tough for me to go all in on him at all. But he is an okay play. I just don't like the price tag on him. Jameis Winston, this all comes down to how you feel about the New Orleans defense. If you think they're going to show up the way they did the last 2 weeks, Winston is going to be a dumpster fire who throws 3 or 4 picks. If you think they're not going to show up, Winston is a fine play at that price tag. And admittedly, even as a Saints homer, I do have Winston in a few lineups this week just to cover my butt because it is possible he has I think he's going to have a big week or a bad week. And, it's important to cover your butt if you're playing enough lineups to where you can kind of get a few different quarterbacks in there. Winston is on a few of my lineups, but I'm not investing too heavily this week in him. I am investing quite a bit into Carson Wentz along with Deshaun Watson. Carson Wentz is one of my most played quarterbacks this week. He's got a great matchup against New York at home. I think he's going to have to throw, or he's going to throw quite a bit. I don't think, even though I do think they could get a lead like they did last week, and I was very surprised to see them go to such a run-heavy approach once they got that lead, and I do think that is a danger this week as well. I think for the price tag, I like Wentz a little more than the 3 guys listed above him on here. I expect him to have a pretty good week. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is going to step up this week. Now, noted he's without Jamal Williams and he's without Devontae Adams. Problem is they're playing in Dallas, and I think they're going to have to throw a little. So as we get to the receivers and tight ends, you're going to see I'm a little high on Jimmy Graham, Geronimo Allison, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling based on their price tag. Again, the thing about daily fantasy is it's not who you like the most. It's who you like the most at the value that you can get them. So for 6K, I think Aaron Rodgers is great, and do not be fooled by this Dallas second in pass defense number. They have played Miami. They have played an Eli-led New York. They have played Washington, and they have played a Teddy Bridgewater-led New Orleans for their games. They have not played against a passing offense of any quality. So putting too much stock into the fact that they're the second-ranked pass defense is cray-cray. And I do like Aaron Rodgers this week in a game where I think he has to throw. Even without his primary weapon, I could see Aaron putting up 3 touchdowns, 300 yards this week in a game where he probably is going to have to throw. Dak Prescott is another guy I think is vastly overrated. The Saints really exploited him last week and showed what he is about. And his early season stats, sorry Cowboy fans, they were based on the matchups he had. He had just incredible matchups to start the year that made him look really good. He's playing against a very good Green Bay secondary this week. This 3rd ranking is valid. They are much improved on defense. I think Zeke has the bigger upside in that offense this week than any of the passing people or Dak. We saw Jordan Howard gash Green Bay last week. So Zeke has the bigger potential. You just never know when a coach is going to key in on who they should key in on. In this case, they should key in on Zeke because he's where their offense is, and we saw that blueprint last week from New Orleans. But I don't think they will. So I think Zeke has the bigger upside here than Dak. Matt Ryan in a high-scoring game with Houston, I just like Deshaun Watson more in that game because he's at home, and quite frankly, Houston's defense is better than Atlanta's. So while I do think Matt Ryan has some potential to have a pretty good game here, and for his price tag, he's okay. I just think there are guys like Wentz, Watson, even Winston, and maybe even Kyler Murray that I like a little more. I'm shocked they have. Phillip Rivers is just like your journeyman QB. My problem playing Phillip Rivers in daily fantasy ever is that he doesn't have like these huge blow-up games that are going to win you tournaments. And in this particular tournament, I'd like to point out the lineup I'm showing you my creation this week is a 20 entry per person contest that pays out a bunch. So on these, you need to take a little bit more sneaky approaches to high upside players rather than the single entry events where you're going to play more super good floors. I'll discuss both as we go through, but Phillip Rivers just middle of the road. even though Denver lost a big piece of their defense this week, I think Phillip Rivers has an okay day, but nothing that's going to like win you good money on DraftKings. Andy Dalton, on the other hand, has the juiciest matchup in history against Arizona, in what I consider him and both Kyler Murray to have a lot of upside this week. But they're also both like Andy Dalton's just not good. He's got a lot of downside, but for his price tag, which I think DraftKings has him priced fairly, because I do think he has a good week this week, he's just a little too high. I wish he was a little cheaper. If he was a little cheaper, I think I'd be a lot more in on the Dalton train this week because Arizona's defense is just that bad. Josh Allen, we don't know if he's going to play this week. It's 50-50 right now. He's still in concussion protocol, though he did practice today. So we don't really know how that's going to turn out. And Tennessee is, as you'll find out in a second, is my favorite defense this week. So I'm not hot now. Daniel Jones, I think they will have to throw against the Vikes. And I like Danny Dimes. I like him for the course of the year, and I think he's only going to get better. But Minnesota's defense is good. I think Minnesota gets out to a lead and runs the ball. So I do think New York's going to be throwing it quite a bit. I just don't know if Daniel Jones is, he's going to be throwing to like Xavier Rhodes and stuff like that. So I just don't know how I feel about Danny Dimes this week in particular. Though I do like Danny Dimes generally, but not as much this week. Minshew Mania, man. He's not a bad quarterback, but for DFS purposes, I just don't see the upside there when that offense runs through Fournette. Kirk Cousins, I think, has sneaky potential this week. My only worry, again, is kind of like what I said about Tom Brady, is that the Vikes get out to a big lead and lead on Dalvin Cook. I think that's how the game script plays this week. So I don't think Cousins inflates his numbers this week the way he needs to after his start to the season. But I do think Adam Thielen has some sneaky value this week because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if you're looking for a super cheap quarterback, that's as low as no, it's not. There's actually a couple of guys lower than him that I like more than Cousins this week. But Cousins is okay for that price tag. Bridgewater is an overpaid backup, and he's not very good. I don't care what anybody says. I'm a Saints fan. You're never going to – I don't think he's the second best quarterback on that team. He might prove me wrong, and as a Saints fan, I hope he does prove me wrong. But I will never start Teddy Bridgewater in daily fantasy. Ever. 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 Kyle Allen, scrub, not playing him. Particularly against Jacksonville. Trubisky's out. Mason Rudolph, again, new quarterback. I just can't trust him. Derek Carr, I will trust some weeks, but not this week against Chicago. Luke Falk, no. Not a no. Mariota, everybody's like, oh, he's looking good this year. He's really not. Look at his fantasy numbers. Like, as a real-life quarterback, he's looked okay, I guess. But his highest game has been 24 points. That's not going to win you anything. I don't think he has especially against Buffalo, it's pretty good defense. I don't think Mariota has the upside to win you what you need this week. The sneakiest play of the week by far for me is Chase Daniel. If you're looking to save money at quarterback, do it there. Because Jacoby Brissett on the Monday night game, if you're playing those, is also a very good, very cheap play because Indy's going to throw a bunch. But he's not listed here, so I just remembered that one. But Brissett's a really, really good cheap play this week. Chase Daniel is a competent backup quarterback. He really is. In a game that I think is going to be close. I'm not playing Chase Daniel this week, but if for whatever reason you're like, I need a quarterback who costs $4,800, play Joe Flacco. but Chase Daniel, if you just like are a mad believer in him, it is possible that. No, I don't want to play Chase Daniel this week. As I talk myself through that, I'm staying away from him. The disrespect to Joe Flacco is unbelievable. They have him listed below Deshaun Kaiser, who's not even starting in Oakland, and Josh McCown, who's not even starting in Philly. That is just so much disrespect to Flacco. And don't get me wrong, I don't think Flacco's the next coming. But Flacco's a serviceable quarterback this week. So if you're looking to scrape the barrel, he's better than, in my opinion, everybody above him up to maybe Kirk Cousins, and maybe even better than Kirk Cousins this week. He might be all the way up to Dalton level, like the 5,700, and you're getting him for 4,700. So I think there's a lot of value there with Joe Flacco, but he's still Joe Flacco. So like I'm not digging that deep at quarterback. I'm not going below. All my quarterbacks this week are either Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, Carson Wentz, Aaron Rodgers, and I might find a way to get an Andy Dalton lineup in just because, like, in a tournament like this where you're trying for first or nothing, that's when the sneaky plays like Dalton or maybe even Flacco or something like that could be playable. But I'm sticking to the first few guys I listed there. It's my quarterbacks this week. But I don't pick quarterbacks first whenever I'm making my lineups because I usually wait to the end or second to last phase to do that. Running backs. All the top running backs are good this week. McCaffrey, Kamara, Cook, Elliott. David Johnson I'm putting in that tier this week. Matter of fact, just to show you how confident I am about that, David Johnson's my number one running back this week. Reason being, he's playing against Cincinnati, who are terrible. He's getting 11 targets, I think, this week. Or last week he got 11 targets. He's highly involved in the pass game in what should be a high-scoring game. He's highly involved in the run game in what should be a high-scoring game. David Johnson, I'm predicting to have his biggest week of the year so far. And that's saying a lot because his first few weeks have been pretty solid and steady. So I think his floor is there, but his ceiling is also there. Elliott on paper has a phenomenal matchup against Green Bay based on what we saw Jordan Howard do last week. It's just whether the Green Bay coaching staff steps up, follows the Saints game plan that shut down Dallas completely last week, and says we're going to focus on Elliott and let Prescott throw. If they do that, which they should if they're smart. I mean, hey, if any NFL teams are hiring out there, it amazes me how many of your coordinators are just dense when it comes to shutting down the opposing team's prime option. If I'm coaching Green Bay this week, I'm devoting everything to shutting down Elliott because I don't think Prescott is that good. So if they're smart, Elliott maybe has a little bit lower upside than this 29th ranked opposing defense would show, but I'm definitely not fading Elliott this week. I think he could have a big week. However, I don't like him as much as Kamara and Cook. I think the Saints do focus their entire offense around Kamara this week. I don't think Tampa Bay has the intelligent defense to key in on that the way that he was keyed in on last week by Dallas. And therefore, I think him and Michael Thomas flip roles again, and Kamara goes to be the star this week with Thomas taking up somewhat of a backseat. Love Dalvin Cook this week in a game that I think the Vikings are going to crush New York. Even in New York, I think they're going to get a lead, and they're going to lean on Dalvin Cook. He has just been magically money this year. So I hate his price tag the same way I hate McCaffrey and Kamara's price tag. But Dalvin Cook, to me, and Kamara have the upside of those top four guys listed here. But I still think David Johnson has a better game than all of them. My problem with McCaffrey is the same thing as I just said about Elliott and Kamara. I want to give defensive coordinators some credit. McCaffrey's all the Panthers have. He's all they have. So if I'm running that defense, which is a good defense in Jacksonville, and I think it's a more intelligent defense, they're going to key in on McCaffrey. I think for the price tag of $8,700 and a guy that the defense is going to stack the box against all day and keep at least one linebacker spied in on him all day, I don't think he's going to have the room to do what he's been doing. Though he proved me wrong last week with what was a pretty good game against a pretty good defense that should have been keying in on him. They weren't stopping his passing game attack enough. And I think Jacksonville is a better defense than Houston, so I don't like McCaffrey at the price tag. I prefer Kamara, Cook, and David Johnson. I'm staying away from all the Chargers running backs this week because I just don't know how that split's going to work. Melvin Gordon's back. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know what Eckler's going to do. I don't know if it's going to change their pass-heavy approach to the game in general. So for me, this week, I'm staying away from all the Chargers running backs. Le'Veon should get volume this week, but Philly's pretty tough against the run. And while I do think that with Darnold out, the offense really is going to be going through Bell, I do think they're going to, again, key in on Bell. He's all they have. So I do like his volume, but I don't like the matchup so much. So I'm not going to be playing a whole lot of Bell. Fournette is phenomenal in terms of volume. He plays as many snaps as almost anybody in the league for his team. He is what that offense runs through, and Minshew has been just good enough to keep defenses from stacking the box against Fournette. Now, he might have a little bit more downside this week because he was so dominant last week that I think they may key in on him, but I think Fournette has higher upside than either of the Chargers guys or Le'Veon Bell this week. Well, about the same as Bell. About the same as Bell. And they've gotten Fournette involved in the pass game, which is massively huge to his daily fantasy value. Mark Ingram. I want to show you guys something about Mark Ingram. That, all the people who are like, Ingram's the next coming. Let me show you something. Mark Ingram rarely even plays half of his team's offensive snaps. So if you're asking me to invest $6,300 of my budget into a guy who only plays 40% of those snaps against a good Pittsburgh defense at that, I'm not doing it. I like Mark Ingram. He's fine. They're just very deep at running back, and even when they run the ball a lot, you don't know if it's him or Gus Edwards or Justice Hill that's going to get the work. You don't even know if Lamar Jackson's going to run in some of that. So I think Ingram, because of the volume he gets, which is really low for the numbers he's put up this year, he's been very efficient with his touches, but I tend to chase volume in fantasy. He just doesn't get it. I'm not comfortable with him. Connor, I don't think Connor has a great week this week, even though I do think he's kind of one of the centerpieces, if not the centerpiece of that offense right now. I think he's slightly overrated as a running back. And last year, people got a false narrative about him because they had AB, and he never faced stack boxes. I do like his volume, but again, let's take a look at that's the big thing. Volume again. Let's look at this. 64% of snaps. The highest amount of snaps he's played all year is 68. And Jalen Samuels seems to be on the upswing in terms of getting some of that work. So people who drafted Connor as a workhorse back, they're not getting what they thought. He's not a workhorse back. And so for that reason, because there's guys like Fournette right around him and the guy right behind him, Mixon, who I like more than him this week, they're just going to get more volume than he is. And so it's tough for me to go all in at that price tag on Connor against a Baltimore defense that I think is going to have a little chip on their shoulder after what Chubb did to him last week. I don't think they're going to let Connor do that. Chubb is better than Connor anyway. So I don't like Connor's chances that much this week. Joe Mixon, if there was ever a week you're going to deploy that dude, this is it. He's got a matchup against a bad Arizona defense and what should be a high-scoring game. He doesn't get as much of his team's volume as I would like to see. He's on the field for about 3/4, about 75% of the plays, 70 to 75%. They're still keeping Bernard involved. But this game could go either way, and it could be high scoring. If Cincy pulls a little bit of a lead somehow, which they might, they're gonna run the ball, and Mixon should get enough touches to make up for a decent fantasy day. I'm not starting him on a whole lot of lineups because their offensive line is atrocious. But like I said, if you're going to roll Joe Mixon, this would be the week to do it. Derrick Henry, I do think Tennessee wins this game, and I do think they lean on him. I'm a little concerned because Buffalo's defense is pretty good, and Henry's not super involved in the passing game. But I do think the volume is going to be there for Henry. He does play 75% of his team snaps, which is pretty good volume. So I do think Henry could have a good day, but I just don't like the price tag's a little iffy for me. Aaron Jones, I'm trying to find spots to play him this week. The problem is all of the Packers offensive guys I kind of like for their value. So I'm either playing him, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Geronimo Allison, or Jimmy Graham. But I'm not playing more than one of those. But virtually one of those is on every one of my lineups because I do think that the entire Packers offense is a little cheap this week. Another huge part about Aaron Jones this week is he does not have to compete with Jamal Williams for touches. He is going to be their feature back this week. He's going to get more work this week than he is accustomed to getting. And without Devontae Adams, they might be using him a little bit more as a featured guy in that offense this week. Dallas is pretty good against the run, so I'm not like I like his volume this week, but I'm not, I like his volume. Sony Michel, look, I don't play Patriots running backs because they're the devil, and you never know who's going to get the work. Now, don't get me wrong. New England's going to beat the brakes off of Washington this week. So if they go in typical Belichick fashion, they'll get a 3-score lead, and then they'll start running. Michel is looked at as a guy who does that running, but again, let's look at the numbers. Sony Michel, he doesn't play a significant portion of that team's snaps, really. If it turns into the kind of game I think it will turn into, he will play roughly 50% of the snaps this week because they're just going to run. But I just can't trust them. They might even get Burkhead in there a little bit, which they have been doing. And Burkhead, could get some running work. So I just don't know, man. I don't trust Patriots running backs. Gallman, I think, was somewhat of a fluke last week. He had a couple good plays. They're up against a very good Minnesota defense in a game they're probably going to have to throw. Now, Gallman can't catch passes. So for his price tag of $5,400, I don't think it's that bad. But it's nothing like the matchup they had last week. So I think there's a guy below Gallman that we're going to get to in a second that I'm going to put on this lineup that is way more valuable for his price tag. Devontae Freeman's got to show me something before I'm going to start him ever in DFS. He has looked terrible this year. He doesn't get a great matchup in Houston this week in what should be a passing, high-scoring shootout. So Freeman's got to show me something, bro. You got to show me something. David Montgomery, actually, I like more this week than usual. It seems like they're getting him more ingrained into the offense. In games that are close or they have a lead, I think he's only going to become more of an integral part of that offense. So you can take a flyer on Montgomery this week. I'm not, because I also think that Gruden has coached his team pretty well against the run. So as you can see, they're 8th best. So while I do see some upside to Montgomery this week, I'm really not messing with him in many of my lineups. Jordan Howard's performance last week was a complete and utter fluke. The fact that he got that much work and that many points last week says he will not do it again this week. He's not even the best running back on that team. Sanders is better than him. If you started Jordan Howard last week, you're a psychic or you got lucky because he's never a good play. James White is an atrocious play this week because they're going to destroy Washington. He's their pass-catching back. He's not going to get the volume he needs. I'm staying away from Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman until I see how that shakes out. Looks like Royce Freeman is slowly starting to take over that backfield. As you can see, excuse me, he actually outsnapped Phillip Lindsay 62% to 45% last week. So he is Freeman is actually seems to be their guy on the rise. And until I can get a clearer picture of how that spread is going to go, I'm staying away from both those running backs because neither one of them has a particularly high floor. Tariq Cohen is basically a wide receiver. And again, he's a guy that I just don't like playing him in DFS, man, or regular fantasy. He's kind of a gimmick player. They are using now. You never know. Chase Daniel in there this week. They might try to rely on him a little more with some short passes. It's definitely possible, but there's still a guy below him that I like more in terms of their price tag. Frank Gore, Father Time, man. Frank Gore, I'm not going to play him in fantasy. Sorry, Frank Gore. Singletary's back this week. Tennessee's a really good defense. Frank Gore, not a good play fantasy. Ronald Jones against New Orleans. New Orleans is really good against the run. Ronald Jones, I do like rest of the year, and I do think he's going to get some juicy matchups. But this is not one of them. So I'm fading Ronald Jones. Which gets me to my next pick, Chris Thompson. Chris Thompson, first of all, Colt McCoy is starting this week for Washington, if you didn't know. Colt McCoy's terrible. Colt McCoy is going to dink and dunk all day. Chris Thompson is going to get the most snap share he's gotten all year in a game that they're getting the break speed off of them by the Patriots. Even on the chance that they're keeping up with the Patriots remotely, Chris Thompson's going to be their main running back, and he's going to get, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 15 targets this week and like 12 or 13 catches. And and maybe hit pay dirt. Chris Thompson for me is the biggest value of the week across the board, even though they're playing against the #1 defense in the league, simply because he's so cheap and they're going to have to throw to him so much. I think there's a couple more running backs we're talking about. Josh Jacobs, he's going to be okay for the year, but Chicago's a tough defense, and he doesn't factor into their pass game as much, which is really a knock on him when it comes to PPR formats like this. So while I do think Jacobs has brighter days ahead of him this year, I don't want to deploy him even at home against Chicago. It's just not a good thing. Anybody below that, I'm just going to tell you, don't even consider playing anyone below that. I wouldn't consider playing Jacobs or Freeman or Jones or Gore I wouldn't consider, other than Chris Thompson, I wouldn't consider playing anyone below David Montgomery this week at 5,200, just to keep it blunt. So it is what it is. Receivers, Hopkins and Julio. I like both these guys in what looks to be a high-scoring game. I think I like Hopkins a little more just because I think he's so due to come back. He's had so many bad games in a row. This guy's way too talented for that. So I think just by the numbers, he gets it on track this week. Julio, same thing. I mean, Julio has been pretty rock steady this year in a game that I think Atlanta's going to have to throw. It's just they're both so expensive. You can't really play both of them on many lineups because there's not like super value picks this week that are going to let you do that. So I'd go with either Hopkins or Julio in your lineup for sure. Try to get one of them in there. Like I said, I'm a little bit more on Hopkins at home in a bounce back week, but Julio's a fine play. Don't forget Devontae Adams is out this week. This does raise the value of Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Geronimo Allison and Jimmy Graham a lot. Keenan Allen, I love his volume this year, man. And I think he'll have a fine day this week again. But I'm not playing Chargers this week. Because now that Melvin Gordon's back, I want to see how the offense shakes out before I really go in on any Chargers. But if you really like Keenan Allen, he's like your cousin's brother's roommate's nephew's friend or some stuff. I don't have a problem with you playing Keenan Allen. It's a fine play. But he's just not as good as some of the guys around him. So Mike Evans goes back to what we were talking about, James Winston. If James Winston has a good day, Mike Evans is going to have a good day this week. New Orleans, Lattimore sells out against the pass a lot, so he can get burned by wide receiver ones a lot. So of Evans and Godwin, I like Evans more this week. I liked Godwin more last week, and I liked Evans more the week before that. So my reads on Tampa Bay receivers have been pretty good up to this point. I think both Godwin and Evans have a chance to do okay this week if the Saints defense doesn't play how they've been playing. But if you're going to take a flyer on one of these guys, I'd say go Evans this week. Simply even because Godwin had such a big week last week. Again, it's just not going to happen again yet. Amari Cooper. This is going to come down to if Green Bay stays in this game early. If they stay in this game early, Cooper could get some work, but it's important to note Green Bay's defense is good in the secondary. They have very good cornerbacks. They just spent a lot of offseason revamping that part of their team, and it showed up until last week where really they got run on all day. But it showed their secondary is good. So I'm not playing Cooper this week, and I would not suggest you play him either. Adam Thielen is squeaky wheel gets the grease. I think Thielen has a good week this week. I'll go as far as to say I think he has his best week of the year this week. I think he will get a touchdown, and I think he does get decent volume. So I think Adam Thielen is a fine play this week. My only worry about that game again is game flow, and that Minnesota gets out to a lead and leans on Dalvin Cook, which is entirely possible in this matchup. So buyer beware on Thielen, but I do think he has a good week this week. Michael Thomas, he has Teddy Bridgewater throwing in passes. I was high on Thomas last week. I'm a little less high on him this week. eh, it's not the worst matchup against Tampa Bay, obviously. Teddy Bridgewater doesn't throw the ball very far down the field, ever. So it's going to be another short to intermediate route day for Thomas. And while I think his volume could be there to get him a serviceable fantasy day, I don't think he's going to hit any home runs that win you any big money on DraftKings this week. Tyler Boyd could have a great week because Arizona Cincy is going to be a high-scoring game. Both teams are going to throw the ball a ton. Both teams are going to run the ball a ton. With John Ross out for the year and no AJ Green yet, Tyler Boyd is going to be their number one option. I think he's got more upside this week than most. I think he's a fine play. I just don't like playing Bengals. Smith-Schuster, I'm not going to trust this year without Ben. He's shown me nothing to show me that he deserves to be played on any of my DraftKings lineups. He's like a wide receiver 1 that's really like a wide receiver 3. He's adapting to having to face better coverage and higher, the opposing guy's cornerback 1. So I'm not playing Schuster, and I recommend you not do it either. Edelman and Josh Gordon, I'm not playing either this week. One of them probably gets a touchdown, but New England's going to get up in that game and just run it. So you're looking for home runs here. Neither of those guys are going to get you a home run. Diggs was kind of a douche this week to his team, and that sometimes gets paid off. Like they're like, oh, we don't want to lose Stephon Diggs, so we're throwing him a bunch. But Thielen handled it a lot better. I think Thielen gets the work this week, and yeah, I'm not playing Diggs this week. Fitzgerald, my only problem with Fitzgerald, I love Fitzgerald this week. I'm just never going to play him and David Johnson in the same lineup, and I'm higher on David Johnson. So with no Christian Kirk, though, very relevant that Fitz is finding his way onto most of my team's lineups that don't have David Johnson. So Fitz is a fine play. Alshon Jeffrey without Deshaun Jackson is also a great play for his price tag. I like Carson Wentz a lot this week. Therefore, I have to think Jeffrey's also going to have a good game. Again, my worry there is just that Philly gets such a lead that they run the ball. But Jeffrey's their big-bodied end zone guy. I think Jeffrey has a good week. Sterling Shepard's, I like Danny Dimes, and they should have to throw a lot against Minnesota. So I like Sterling Shepard a lot this week. I think he's got a lot of play potential. It really comes down to whether they decide to shadow him with Xavier Rhodes or not. If they choose not to, because he's not exactly a marquee wide receiver 1, and usually Minnesota only shadows people with Rhodes if they're facing a true wide receiver 1. So I think he doesn't shadow Shepard this week, and I think Shepard gets the same volume he's been getting, and in a game New York should be playing from behind, Shepard's a pretty good play this week. Marquise Brown, man, I had him on so many lineups the last 2 weeks, and he burned me. I was a believer in him after the first 2 weeks. But this week, his matchup against Pittsburgh doesn't get any better. It's not a great matchup. Pittsburgh's defense is pretty good, and I need to see him do what he did the first few weeks before I'm back on that train. I gave him 2 chances the last 2 weeks, and he screwed me on quite a few lineups. So, I'm a little biased there, but I'm not messing with Marquise Brown. Allen Robinson, I like because Chase Daniel's in there this week. I think Chase Daniel's a better quarterback than Mitch Trubisky. I think Trubisky is hot garbage. And what happens with backups is they tend to look at their number 1 receiver a lot. And that, I think, is going to happen this week. I think Robinson gets more volume than he usually gets. And, well, if Chicago's ahead, they're going to lean on Montgomery, as I said in the running back section. But if Chicago finds themselves in any kind of close game or deficit, I think Robinson has a pretty good week this week because I think Daniel's just going to stare at him and throw him a lot of passes. Valdez-Scantling and Geronimo Allison, who's a little bit lower and cheaper. They're both great plays this week. I'm going to play one of them on this lineup. I think I have more. For me, I have a ton of Valdez-Scantling already. So I'm going to go GA on this one simply because like I have this vision in my head of him going, Geronimo Allison gets his second touchdown of the day. Remember, this is because Devontae Adams is out, and I do think the Packers are going to be trailing. So I do think they're going to throw a lot, and it's going to either be Marquez Valdes-Scantling or Geronimo Allison. I like Geronimo Allison's price tag a little more because he's $600 cheaper, and I think they have both about the same upside. So we'll just see how that shakes out, but I could see that one going either way. So in this particular lineup, I'm going to go with the slightly cheaper option, but Valdes-Scantling is an amazing play this week. Day Westbrook, he's been too inconsistent, and I like DJ Chark more than I like him. And DJ Chark is cheaper. So I'm not playing Westbrook. I'm not playing any Carolina receiver that isn't named Curtis Samuel. The fact that they have DJ Moore more expensive than Curtis Samuel blows my mind. DJ Moore has been getting so much fewer targets without Cam. He's looking more at Curtis Samuel, so I think DJ Moore is a really easy fade this week. Tyrell Williams, not healthy. He is all they have, but he's playing against Chicago. I think Waller has a better game than Tyrell Williams, as he kind of has been. I don't mind the price tag here in a game that I think they may be losing, but I'm not playing Tyrell Williams this week. John Brown, I think Tennessee shuts down Buffalo. We don't know if Josh Allen's playing. Brown's value skyrockets when Allen's in and really plummets when they're dealing with Matt Barkley. So this week, because of the uncertainty of Josh Allen's status, I'm not messing with John Brown, and I think Tennessee's going to shut him down. Terry McLaurin is a great matchup in a game, or game flow matchup in a game where Washington should have to throw the ball a freaking ton. But New England is lights out against receivers. McLaurin is also 50-50 to play. So while I do think he has upside in this game, simply because they're going to have to throw the ball a ton, it is Colt McCoy, and he's not fully healthy. So, and I have Chris Thompson. So in this lineup, I'm obviously not playing McLaurin. Matter of fact, I don't think I have McLaurin on any of my lineups because I really think the Patriots are just going to raffle stomp him this week. I do like Emmanuel Sanders this week at this price tag. I'm just going to say it. I'm gonna will it into existence. Him and Sutton have been neck and neck with targets. Sanders has a slight edge on the year. My thing here goes back to the psychological aspect. Sutton had 2 TDs last week. And while I think a lot of analysts would say that's good, that bodes well for his value, I think week to week it bodes worse for his value because I think the odds of him repeating that kind of performance this week are not as good. I think Sanders gets a lot of the intermediate routes and gets a lot of his yards after carry this week. So I may take Sanders out of my lineup, but I do like Sanders this week. DJ Chark I like. I think he's the best target on that team, but they are playing Carolina. And I do think that offense is running through Fournette this week. I think Fournette's a better play than Chark. Obviously, Fournette's a lot more expensive than Chark. But, Minshew still does spread it a little bit around between Westbrook, Chark, and Conley. So while I do like Chark as the biggest receiving option this week on that team, he ain't going to make the cut here. Kirk's out. No, who cares about Gallup? I mean, I think Gallup's been kind of a fluke this year with the numbers. He only played 2 weeks, and he had an okay week 1. I'm not a believer in Gallup. Ridley, there's too many targets there, even though any Atlanta receiver could have a big day this week in a game they're going to have to throw against Houston. Houston's typically worse against wide receiver 1s, as weird as that sounds. So I'm not super high on him. Dorsett is New England. We talked about New England receivers this week. Sutton, same as Sanders, and he's a little bit cheaper. But again, I'm going to go back to Sutton. Had such a good week last week. He probably doesn't duplicate it. Aguilar is a fine play because Deshaun Jackson's out again. So Aguilar for the 4,700 price tag is fine. I like Alshon Jeffrey more, but Alshon Jeffrey is also a lot more expensive. Golden Tate is a huge question mark this week. If you want to take a cheap flyer for 4,600 and maybe he's just like their guy, go for it. I won't tell you that's the worst move ever, but I'm not playing Tate until I see him deployed on that offense. Beasley, definitely not worth playing this week against the Titans. Curtis Samuel is the only receiver on Carolina I would even consider playing, but they're playing against the Jags. And I just think that's going to be a defensive game. Fuller, no. Anderson is a sneaky play. He's got some touchdown upside against Philly. Philly's secondary is not good. So I do think Anderson has some upside. The problem is it's still Luke Falk under center. He does not throw the deep ball well. Anderson is a deep ball guy. So I actually like Jamison Crowder, who you're going to see a little lower. Yeah, right here. I like Jamison Crowder more than Robbie Anderson this week because I think Falk's going to be keeping the passes short to intermediate. Sneed's a no-go. Richardson's a dummy. I wouldn't play anybody else below that. Anybody else you're playing below that is a pure dart throw. And, I mean, I guess if you know that Chase Daniel and Anthony Miller are like roommates or something, you could maybe take a flyer on Miller with Gabriel out, but I wouldn't play anyone below Jamison Crowder this week at all. Corey Davis is coming up, but I don't think his volume's where I want it to be yet. Yeah, whenever his biggest target game of the year is 6 targets, that's just not a guy I want to trust for daily fantasy with my money. So I think the worst play the lowest you should go this week in terms of plays is Robbie Anderson or Jamison Crowder or Robbie Anderson. Anything really, and then the only other guys in there are Aguilar and then the Denver guys. Anything below that you just don't want to do. Tight ends, Ertz is just expensive, man. And he's playing against a Jets team that's very tough against tight ends. So I'm not too big on Zach Ertz this week just because the matchup doesn't bode well for him. And I don't think they're going to have to throw that much if they get out to a lead. So even though I do like Carson Wentz, and it could be a big game for Ertz, it really could. I don't like spending a lot on a tight end ever. Just especially weeks when there are some expensive, like I know this last wide receiver spot's probably going to be, I'll just do it now, DeAndre Hopkins. So I know I'm going to have to keep things a little cheaper, and one of the best places to keep things cheap is your tight end list. Ertz is fine this week. He's just expensive. Ingram, I think, is just as fine as Ertz this week, also very expensive. Waller, my top 4 tight end for the rest of the year, amazing. He's playing Chicago this week. Still, I mean, these are the best tight ends, but they're just too expensive based on value perspective. Mark Andrews is the most overpriced thing ever. He's had a couple bomb weeks, I know, but let's go back to snap counts. Mark Andrews he doesn't even play the most snaps on that team at his position. So I think a lot of his results have been semi-fluky because he doesn't even play the most snaps on his team for tight ends. So it's tough for me to trust the Andrews. I like Hooper more than I like Andrews by a good bit in a shootout game. I probably am going to pick Hooper on this particular lineup because even though I'm a little sketched because he's had such good weeks, and he's 4,500, man, it's still more than I even like to spend on a tight end. But I do like Hooper this week. I also like Graham a lot this week without Devontae Adams. I think Graham's going to be Rodgers' #1 red zone target. And if I didn't have Geronimo Allison in this lineup, Jimmy Graham would be my tight end for the week in this lineup. Olsen could have an okay week. I don't trust Howard till we see what he's about or until he does what he's supposed to do. Delaney Walker is a great tight end. Don't let that fool you. And he leads his team in target share. But look who he's playing against. Buffalo #1 against tight ends. So I think this is an okay week to fade Walker. Vance is not at 100% health. I do like Vance rest of the year. He seems to have a good relationship with Rudolph. This week, not so much. Witten, I'm never playing. He just doesn't get the volume. Watson, same. Cook, same. There's a sneaky play down here in Eifert. My only problem with Eifert is that he only plays like half of his team snaps. So the volume is not there, but very worth noting, Arizona can't stop anything at tight end. Anything. So Eifert, I think, has a great chance of hitting the end zone this week. And for his price tag, you know what? We're going to roll Eifert on this one because this is one where we're trying to hit home runs. I'm going to keep it as cheap as possible so that I can maybe still get a good quarterback and still get a good flex. As you can see, we got a lot of cheap players, and it's still our budget's just shot. Now we are about to pick our defense. Defense, there's only three options this week, in my opinion. You're playing the Patriots, you're playing the Eagles, or you're playing the Titans. For me, it's all Titans because I'm still not sure if Josh Allen's playing. The Titans defense is better than the Eagles defense, and they're cheaper. I don't understand why they have the Titans this low. I think Titans are the slam dunk defense matchup of the week. And if they screw it and give up a bunch of points, I ain't winning nothing this week because I think I have the Titans maybe on every single lineup. They're just by far the best value. So now we have 68.50 to go with our last two. I don't like. Do I want to stack them? Do I want to do the what? So here I'm going to tinker, right? I'm going to pick Watson, who I like this week a lot, and see what I can get at flex. Oof. I wish I could get 100 more. Oh wait, 7,700. So let me do it the other way. So let me see if I can get Julio, who I also think is going to have a huge game. Let's see what quarterback I can get. Yeah. Okay, I'm okay with this. And then I'm going to go Aaron. I just, I like Wentz a little more. He's 100 more. But just call it a hunch that Rodgers has a big week this week. So that's how I set my lineup. We'll see how that lineup does. But hopefully, we went through some matchups. I'm sorry I got a little brief, but man, I've been talking for the past 2 hours trying to make this. And with audio shutting out on me on the last one, I kind of skimped on the quality of this one, and I'm sorry. It's the first video. Bear with me. I'm going to get a little bit more, a little more juices flowing for the next few. But I really, if you've gotten to this point on the video, I really appreciate you watching. We are going to highlight a lot of matchups every week. Please either even if you don't like this, what I had to say and you disagree, put it in the comments. Tell me what an idiot I am and how Tom Brady's the best play of the week or something like that. I'm up for criticisms too. Like I said, hopefully this helps you out. Hopefully we all make a little money this week. And hopefully I'll see you next time on the Ultimate Fanguy, episode 2, which will be out next Friday. And I might even do some in the week for like Survivor and stuff if you like reality TV. But thanks again for tuning in. And I hope I was at least able to give you a little insight on something. Or maybe even just let you know a few injuries you weren't aware of. So much love and best of luck crushing DFS this week.